Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Critical Thoughts. I'm your host, Braxton Smith, and joining me tonight is famous co-host Jake Bird. Tonight we're here to talk about, this is actually something Jake's been wanting to talk about for a while, and I forgot to mention it on the video with the Propur raffle. Was talking about, he brought up a really interesting point about inequality versus inequity. And without further ado, Jake, you want to go ahead and kick us off with this?
Yeah, and I guess the first place that we need to start off is with our actual Propur results and stuff. And here's our infamous spreadsheet, all the sophistication that we put forth into it. And one of the things I noticed about it is we've got 14 people, 31 total entries, but as you'll notice from these totals, and as you would have been noticing, there aren't too many people with a whole lot of grand totals, right? Most of the applicants just put in one entry. And a lot of times in the media, in life, people will try to present you with situations, and they'll look at the descriptive statistics, just the end outcome totals, and it's like, oh, look at all of these people, they have so few. Look at these few people, they have so much. There must be something wrong with the system.
Yeah, it's kind of like that one meme we've seen with, they have that meme with the kids. And there's so many different interpretations for it, but the general one is the kids sitting at a baseball field, and they're standing rather, and they're trying to look over the fence, and you have like the tallest one that's like up on crates or whatever, and they're trying to describe like wealth inequality, basically. Very sloppily, mind you.
Yeah, and they're trying to do like the difference between equity and equality and stuff, and it's like it's three kids. And the equality one, they all each have one crate, and they're standing on it. And, the taller ones can obviously see over, but the little one can't. And then in equity, it's the tall one doesn't even have a box. The middle one has one box, and the shorter one has two boxes. And, that has something to do with it, too, because the obvious question with that for me is, okay, you're looking at the outcomes right there, but, okay, this isn't a baseball game. Why don't they have seats?
Yeah, right. That was my question. I'm like, hey, where's their tickets? Like, freeloaders. They're all freeloaders.
and that's the thing. I mean, that's the problem. They'll give you these outcomes, and then they'll prescribe their own theory of why this is, but they won't show you any competing ones. And with this Propur raffle, okay, we've got, as we said, 14 people and stuff, but we didn't put any limitations on it. Basically, if you could show us a social networking site and you showed us that you participated in it, that would count for you. And as you can see, you've got so many with so few, and so few with so many in this breakdown and stuff. And I wanted to bring up the topic of the Pareto distribution. It was created a long time ago by a social scientist, and the premier concept with it was describing actually distribution of income. And a lot of people know it as the Matthew principle, the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, and it's basically how usually in society 20% of the people end up with 80% of the wealth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just assume that's, some sort of nefariousness explains all or most of that.
Well, there actually is some reason to that. I don't mean to stop your momentum there, but I mean, like with this experiment, not really experiment, observation, I should say, that you made, you do well to point out that, it's much like life. If you put forth the effort and invest the time, you will yield better results. And but the thing about real life, though, is we have instances where the government intervenes and lines pockets of these. In fact, you don't hardly get to be a billionaire unless like the government is intervening and lining the pockets of people. It's like forcefully extracting the wealth.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want this to be interpreted as there's never any malfeasance, but whenever someone presents you one of these theories, you need to actually look at it and you need to understand there's multiple explanations for the situation that are possible. You need to be able to actually distinguish between who are bad actors and who are good actors, and that's the problem with a lot of these analyses. You know, corrupt Republicans, they'll go like, oh, they're all just, fighting it out on their own in the free market, even though they're providing their subsidies. And then it's, Democrats, they'll go, well, it's the evil overlord, or it's, that's why they have so much and stuff. And then if you look through history, some of the more prosperous people in like railroads and stuff before it completely got taken over by government regulation were those that didn't take any subsidies. The longest living railroad to not have a bankruptcy was this private organizer. I can't even think of his name right now. But that's the thing. A lot of times, some of the people that complain about the situation are actually ones having unfair benefits and stuff. And this is just a nice reminder to show people that you have to actually look at the situation, you have to look at the process, and you actually have to think about it before you can just blatantly assume things just because of outward appearances. Because like I said, with our contest, it was fair and stuff, but you still get the Pareto distribution, which has been applied to not just wealth distribution, but there's also other applications like hard disk drive errors and stuff. It's just, it seems that there's this tendency out in the world that can be described mathematically where a large number of instances can be associated with a few number of sites or people and things of that nature. And pretty much this whole thing is just showing how even with only 14 people, we get a pretty good approximation of the Pareto distribution, right? Pareto distributions in between power laws and logarithmic laws. This is what this graph is all about. Because we've got the data right here, and the trend lines, the one that closely approximates it is power law. And then the logarithmic is up here, and you both get over simple majority for the R squared. And then down here, it's called the 80-20 rule for a reason, so I just started analyzing, okay, you've got these bottom numbers right here. This is the number of entries, so that's the total wealth in this scenario, and the frequency is the number of people that have that portion of wealth. And so I saw exactly how those factors came close, and as you get closer to just evaluating the top bracket, you see it coming closer to the ratio of the 80-20 rule. So basically all this is saying, even in a completely fair situation, you still get this 80-20 distribution. You're still getting where just a few people have all these entries, and a lot of people might only have one. And if you really want to go to it, I'm sure thanks to our viewers and stuff, the video got shared a lot of times, and people might just watch the video and saw the contest go on and still not participated. So you could say all of them, they didn't really get anything out of this raffle, except maybe some entertainment value.
Yeah, last I checked, it was about 160 people, anyways, that have actually watched the video on YouTube and had the opportunity to share it in one way or another, either through YouTube, Facebook. They got something where they could have shared it, but yeah, that's a good point. I actually had a meme. It's not quite as sophisticated as what you got going on there, but I had a meme I was gonna share with you that I thought was pretty pretty accurately describes the whole situation. You got it. Here it is. Is it sharing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Remember this one?
Yeah.
This is like the one I wish I could like share with everybody that has this misconception that simply because somebody's successful, they are the enemy. I mean that is, that is the epitome of envy. Envious are the poor that want to take from the rich to line their own pockets. And I will say conversely, though, greedy are the politicians, and especially the millionaires that want to use the government's force to become billionaires. A couple of deadly sins I just want to throw out there for folks on how society works anyways, or my own observations for what it's worth.
One final thing on this subject, especially with the use of statistics, is, again, they'll show these outward circumstances and then they'll throw in there. And as you can see, this is apparently statistically significant, so therefore it's got to be wrongdoing. Well, no. The statistics is always about understanding random occurrences. So when you're talking about, let's say, a physics experiment, like you'd have to do at high school, most people, I think, would have had to have tried to figure out, the acceleration due to gravity, right? You get some mass, you drop it for a certain length of time, you do that a couple of times, and then you come out with, a mean estimate of whatever the acceleration is. You might get like 9.83 plus or minus 0.03 meters per second squared. You're already assuming in the beginning that's how gravity works. What you're testing with the statistics is that variation. Is that a plausible account of what you're trying to explain? And if it is, can that exclude other possible accounts? If two people have two similar stories about how something occurred, but you can't really distinguish them because they're both arguing for the same outcomes, how do you distinguish them? And that's what science pretty much is. They have all these different theories about how things occur, and so they're trying to go, all right, what are the ways that we can try to distinguish them? What are the ways that we can run an experiment, get, some mean value and some standard of variation, and do they overlap? Do they intermix? Is that due to human error? So on and so forth. And just simply saying, well, this is a statistically significant outcome, meaning usually in hypothesis testing, it's not just random error that's conflating everything. If you have a theory, it'll work out. Does it mean that that's in fact the theory that's happening? It means that there is no error clouding up the noise if you assume that those events happen. But with hypothesis testing, depending on how people arrange it, there's the null hypothesis and then the hypothesis you're trying to prevent. You can swap those two statements and you can both reject and accept the null hypothesis, which basically means the way you constructed your experiment to try to distinguish between the two outcomes is too vague. You weren't specific enough. Or there's just too much noise.
Yeah, I notice that's often, I will make it clear to the audience, yes, Jake was also speaking way up here and I was understanding right about here. But what I did gather from it is something I see all too often in society. It's like a very, very egg-headed way of explaining that a lot of people want to say that because they found one variable involved with a certain outcome, they assume that variable is a single cause. In fact, I think we pointed out the single cause fallacy, where you're not taking into account all these other variables, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I do see that pretty often. And healthcare, I think, was something we were talking about on the page recently. And we're talking about like why certain things cost certain amounts, and it's because there are 1,000 different variables. I mean, I could give you 1,000 reasons why, but I can give you one simple answer that regulating it is not the answer that works conversely, obviously. But that's getting off on a whole nother tangent. But that was basically the gist I was getting. Am I right?
Well, there's also the fallacy of just assuming a single cause, but there's also the fact that in competing causes, trying to isolate any one of them as the cause is tricky enough as it is, and you can't just look at the data and go, well, here's the distribution right here, right? I got this mean value and I got this standard deviation, so it must be the case. No, the whole point of statistics is trying to make sure your experiments are to some extent credible. That has nothing to do with the underlying assumptions that you use to even test to begin with. You have to understand how things work and how competing ideas of things work actually interact. You can't just go, oh, plugged and chug into this computer data, so it's got to be right. Otherwise, there wouldn't be numerous distributions to begin with. There's the Pareto distribution. There's what most people are used to as the normal distribution, the Gaussian, right? The bell curve. There's Poisson. There's all these different distributions, which, if it only mattered about looking at the end result, why even have them to begin with?
Right. Okay, well, any final thoughts before we wrap all this up?
Generally, I know both me and you have been a little slow with our own little video projects, but I promise mine's in the works. Hopefully I can go over a little bit more statistics and stuff like that, and hopefully not be too egg-headed about it.
I'm sorry, Jake. It was pretty hard to keep up with a lot of that. You weren't really breaking it down to layman's too much there. It was like, I'm sure the people at university will be proud of you in this video.
Well, to flare up things, with something controversial, how do you distinguish between someone who is raped and someone who just accuses of being raped, for instance?
Oh, geez. This is where we get shut down, Jake. Good job. She has a right to be believed, okay? Here's a better question. How many innocent people are worth being sent to prison to convict one guilty guy? Or rather, how many guilty guys is it okay to, free with one innocent person? Huh? Think about that. That's maybe one we should discuss in the future, huh? I think we're about getting to the end of this video.
Yeah, but we got more raffles hopefully in the future. I'm still on the lookout, maybe finding some news articles that I can do analysis for. I'm sure you're thinking of different ideas to try to involve some of your passions like music into contests and stuff, and eventually we'll get around to them.
Yeah, you're starting to sound like me, Jake, with the whole homogenization of America video series. That finale's just been waiting for over a year now. We'll get to it. We'll get to it one of these days, I swear. Hey, you got your water filter, audience. What else do you want? I didn't get mine. What the fuck? Well, anyways, I guess that about does it for this episode. Thank you again for tapping into Critical Thoughts, breaking through the white noise, bringing the media that matters.